Hello guys, welcome back to Tiger Tales, a place where you'll find stories written and read to you by your host, me, Tai Tiger. Today we're diving into a Power Rangers fanfiction. Before we do, I do want to quickly say that my fanfictions are exactly that, fiction written by the fan. I don't mean to infringe on the original content, and I'm not trying to breach copyright. So let's dive in with Universe 35 with the Power Rangers Magnificent Megaforce. The Universe 35 is a world where the Power Rangers Super Megaforce lost to the Armada. The Super Mega Battle never happened, and the world has been under the Iron Fist of the Armada for the last 50 years. In the last chapter, Chapter 1, we met Ozzy, a miner in District 21, and he met a Morphing Master after finding the red Super Mega Force power key, Ranger key. Albert came to his rescue, who is his guide. So let's dive in with Power Rangers Magnificent Megaforce Chapter 2, The Magnificent Explained. Albert and the red Super Force Ranger were back to back, surrounded by X-Borgs. Albert swung the power sword, slashing down to X-Borgs, but more X-Borgs advanced, taking their place, and Albert parried one of their attacks and stabbed one down. The red Super Mega Force Ranger summoned his weapons, his Super Saber, which looked like a pirate's cutlass, and his Super Blaster, which looked like a flintlock pistol. "Yo, this is so cool," the Red Ranger called out. "Can you focus?" Albert snapped. The Red Ranger nodded and then swung his sword, cutting down an X-Borg. Then he aimed his blaster and pulled the trigger, blasting another X-Borg down. Albert ran his finger up the blade of the power sword. As he did, the blade started glowing red. "Power slash!" Albert called out. He then swung the sword down and the energy slash ripped through a group of the X-Borgs. Then the Red Ranger jumped up and rapidly pulled the trigger, energy blast raining down on the last few. The Ranger landed next Albert. "Hey, thanks man," the Red Ranger chuckled. "Don't celebrate yet," Albert barked. Albert and the Red Ranger both dropped into their fighting stances as Redker came running up to both of them. Both his wrists were armed with two medium-sized blades making claws. Redker was the general to District 21. He swung his claws, slashing down the Red Ranger, then he kicked Albert back. Albert stabilized himself, then tried to jab Redker with the tip of his power sword. The Red Ranger aimed his blaster and pulled the trigger. Redker stumbled backwards, then he tried to run at Albert. "I think I got this," the Red Ranger called out. The Super Saber started glowing, and he jumped in front of Redker, making Redker grab him instead. The Red Ranger swung his arm as best he could. "Super Mega Saber Blast!" the Red Ranger called out. The energy erupted from the blade and hit Redker, but Redker was still holding on to the Ranger. A huge explosion erupted between the Monster General and the Ranger himself. The Ranger flew back and smashed into the floor and demorphed. The monster flew back and exploded into nothing. Albert threw the power sword and it disappeared in a flash of sparkling light. Albert ran Ozzy, who was laid on the ground. He was now covered in bruises and unconscious. Albert pulled Ozzy off the ground.
"We have to get out of here,"
Jason barked in his mind. Albert looked around and nodded. He noticed that the miners all started cheering and clapping. One of them swung a pickaxe into an X-Borg in the head and it dropped to the ground. Another man picked up an X-Borg's blaster and started firing it. Suddenly more people joined in. Within seconds a whole riot had erupted. Albert held Ozzy tight and he fled the battleground, leaving District 21. Ozzy woke suddenly, his head ringing. He looked around to find himself in some sort of temple. The walls were dull bronze, filled with carvings. The plant life had overgrown and ran up the walls and covered the ceiling. The door had been closed and collapsed under a massive pile of rubble, filling the space, trapping anyone inside and stopping anyone from getting in. "Don't worry, there is a tunnel that leads to a forest," Albert said. Ozzy snapped his head to see Albert pointing at a tunnel entrance, and he was sat by several computer screens. Sunlight beaming down from the massive holes in the wall. Some of them looked like they were purposely made, almost like windows. Others were just smashed into the wall. "Good thing you're awake, huh?" Albert said as he walked over to the small fridge and opened it. He pulled out a small bowl of food, and then he passed it to Ozzy. "Thanks," Ozzy muttered, and started eating the purple flakes. "Where are we?" Ozzy asked. A temple. I never found out who owned it beforehand, before the Armada invaded. It got abandoned, so I made it my base, Albert explained. And it has electricity? Ozzy questioned. Yeah, I use solar power, and it's sunny like all the time here, so why not? Albert said. You're my guide, Ozzy stated. Yes, I am, that is correct, Albert replied. Run that by me again, on how that works. And also, how did I become Ranger? And did you use the power sword? Ozzy said with confusion. Well, one thing at a time. They all kind of interlock, actually, Albert said. Albert stood and pulled out a small device. He pressed it and a small hologram appeared. It was the map of the world. When the Armada invaded, the humans gave up fighting eventually, and the world was split into 32 districts. Some are massive, with more than 1 or 2 cities. Some of them can be really small, not even town-sized. Each district has a general, who rule over it. They're the king's guard, per se, and the king doesn't care on how they rule their districts, Albert explained. Yeah, I knew this much, Ozzy muttered. Well, back then, when the last of our forces were fighting back, the Super Megaforce Rangers were gone, a small team of former Power Rangers and Masters grouped together, Albert explained. Who were they? Ozzy asked.
Udana, the wise sorceress, Master Casey, the former Jungle Fury Red Ranger, and the Master of the Claw, Dustin, former Yellow Wind Ranger, and an instructor at the Wind Ninja Academy, Justin, the former Blue Turbo Ranger, and the Blue Cyberforce Ranger, Jen, from the year 3000, she was a Time Force officer and the Pink Time Force Ranger, and myself, former Red Mighty Morphin, Gold, Zeo, and, of course, Red Ultra Ranger.
A voice said. Ozzy looked around but saw no one. Okay, now who said that? Ozzy asked, rather confused. Jason, stop being a dick, Albert blurted to the room. Suddenly, a small sparkle of light flashed before him, and a whitish-grey, misty figure stood in front of Ozzy. Yo, is that a ghost? Ozzy gasped as he jolted back.
I prefer spirit, but I guess you are correct.
Jason sighed. Wait a second. I recognise you from the database. You're Jason, the original Red Ranger, Ozzy gasped.
He likes stating the obvious, doesn't he?
Jason asked Albert sarcastically. Leave him alone, he's new at this, Albert snapped. Sorry, I was taken back by the ghost, spirit of a original Power Ranger. You were saying about this small group of Rangers? Ozzy asked.
Oh, right, yeah. So, us Rangers went to Gosei, the mentor of the Super Megaforce Rangers, and we came up with a plan. We unchained the legendary Ranger keys from their restrictions. They were already scattered across the Earth, and we needed them to be able to access their powers without needing a Super Megaforce Morpher. We know there would be a time when someone would be able to fight back.
Jason explained. Okay, so your whole plan was leaning on the idea that there might be someone who tries and fights back eventually? Ozzy questioned.
No, Jen is from the future, and her future was safe, free from war, and there was only one guy in the middle of all of it, and he had legendary Ranger keys. She never saw his face, but she started helping us.
Jason explained once more. Okay, so now I'm that person, Ozzy said, pointing to himself.
Yes, Ozzy, you are.
Jason replied. So where does this ring come from then? Ozzy asked, pointing to the ring on Albert's hand.
Well, we knew the Chosen One wouldn't have the knowledge of the Ranger keys and powers behind them, or the generals they would face. We needed someone to navigate the Chosen One, educate them, train them, and have their back. That's where Albert comes in.
Jason told him. You're my guide, Ozzy stated it once again. Yeah, I wasn't born in any district. I was actually born in the mystical realm, and kept there until a couple years ago. I learned how to fight, I learned all the history of the Rangers, and I learned how to build stuff and forage. I actually built your morpher, Albert explained. Ozzy pulled out the flip phone-like morpher from his pocket. It was a sandy brown flip phone with some silver tubes coming to one side. That's actually pretty cool, Ozzy grinned. Ozzy then turned to Jason. So, how does this ring work? Ozzy asked.
His ring was forged by magic and advanced technology, using key elements like the materials that made the power coins and the material that made the ninja power stars. The stone in the middle of the ring is a sliver of the Zeo crystal and a dino gem fused together, charged by magic and spirit power. And it's linked to the morphing grid, and it holds several weapons previously owned by Rangers.
Jason explained. Right, and how do you link to all this? Ozzy asked Jason.
Well, we thought that whoever was gonna save the world, whenever that would happen, needed a mentor, a ranger who's been through it all. And I volunteered.
Jason sighed with a heavy breath. Okay, so now what happens? Ozzy said as he rubbed his eyes.
Well, when the Morphing Master appeared, the keys all activated. Now our job is to go and collect them, take the generals down, as we go.
Jason told him. Ozzy's mind started to race. This was a lot for him to take in all at once. He stood and walked away from the strange temple boy and his ghost psychic. He walked through the small doorway which Albert pointed out earlier, which led him through the tunnel and outside. He walked for a couple of minutes, and then he sat down on the grass. One of the districts could be seen from the hillside that Ozzy sat on. Albert appeared next to him and handed him his morpher and the red Super Megaforce key. "I've never left my district, you know," Ozzy muttered. "Most people don't," Albert replied. Albert just looked at the ground. "Look, I know this is really weird, but your district is safe. The civilians have barricaded themselves in, and they retrieved all the weapons and started defending themselves. And the more we help other districts, the more they'll do the same. And look, if you need to go back and help them for any reason, we can go and help them," Albert told him. Ozzy's gaze bolted at Albert. "Really? Are you sure?" Ozzy asked. "Yeah, man, of course," Albert cheered. Ozzy sighed with relief. Then they sat there for a while. Both of them just sat there. "So, now what?" Albert asked. "Now we kick some ass, and we get some ranger keys at the same time," Ozzy grinned. They both stood up and headed back into the temple and started going through the map once more. In the land without time and space, William Cranston stood there in front of an oddly large chessboard. One side was filled with 32 black pieces, the other side had 2 white pieces. He then picked up one white piece and knocked over the black piece with it. 31 generals left, boys. Your journey has barely begun," William said with a slight grin. And there we have it, guys. Chapter 2 to Power Rangers Magnificent Megaforce. I know this was a quick one, but I am very much enjoying writing this storyline. It's very different and very unique. I just want to quickly say thank you to the voice of Jason, aka Cosplay Dude 67, aka Willie, aka my Parabatai. He is kindly being the voice of Jason, and I thought the role was very well dedicated to him. Willie is a story writer and publishes his stories in an audio drama format like myself on Spotify. You can find him in 2 different places. The first one is Cosplay Dude, a story time with Cosplay Dude 637. This is where he writes his X-Men, his Sword Art Online and Shadowhunters fanfiction with his original story called The Order. Then if you go to Spotify and find the Power Rangers Universe 19 podcast, you'll find his Power Rangers Ultra Rangers, his Power Rangers Cyberforce, his Power Rangers Skyforce, and now his Kamen Rider storylines. All of these stories are absolutely fantastic, and I'm enjoying every single one of them. Also, go check out Mark the Red Cornish Ranger on TikTok and on Spotify. He has a Spotify podcast called Nerds for Comics, where he's adapting very well-known comics into audio dramas, and I'm actually one of his voice actors, and he will be doing some original content soon. Make sure you go check out both these lads. They're absolutely awesome, and I wouldn't be here doing this without either of them. So thank you guys for listening. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. I hope you guys have enjoyed, and I shall see you guys very, very soon.